You Booked It, episode 61. Hey, entertainers and performers of the world. I'm your host, Dane Reese, and welcome to You Booked It, where I chat with inspiring entertainment professionals 7 days a week. By digging into their journey, we're going to discover everything you need to do to have a successful entertainment career. You know, because training usually skips that part about how to actually make your skills work for you in the real world. Fellow entertainers, my drive here at You Booked It is to share the inspiring and incredible journeys of successful entertainment professionals. We're here to support your journey. So go to youbookeditpodcast.com and join the You Booked It email community, where we dig deep into truly actionable things you can be doing right now to book that next audition, submission, or gig. If you enjoy this free podcast, please show your support and search for You Booked It on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app, where you can subscribe so you don't miss an episode, leave a rating, and review. And now, let's do this. All right, let's get started. I am excited to introduce my guest today, Kyle Seeley. Are you ready for this, Kyle?
I'm ready for this.
All right, man, let's do it. Kyle is a dancer and model and has traveled as far as Tokyo, Japan to dance in the show Endless Shock and model for Japanese clothing line 1cc. He has also danced for artists such as Will Smith, Todrick Hall, Zayn Malik, Amara La Negra, and danced and choreographed for the YouTube sensation Prince EA's video Before You Get Married, which has 122 million views. Kyle, that is a quick intro of who you are and what you've done, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Fill in the gaps. Who you are, where you're from, where you're currently calling home, and a little bit more about what you do as a professional in the entertainment industry.
Thanks so much for the wonderful and humbling introduction, Reese.
My pleasure.
I was originally born and raised in Maryland, Prince George's County, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. Started training in the Washington School of Ballet and went to a performing arts high school, Suitland High School for the Performing Arts. Moved up to New York to train at the Alvin Ailey School for Dance and Broadway Dance Center. Got an agent out there and was doing a lot of freelance work until I got into the Las Vegas show, the very legendary Don Arden's Jubilee. And I was in the closing cast there. And while I was there, I had gotten signed to an agency out of Los Angeles. So I figured, why not go out to Los Angeles and give it a shot? So I've been out here for about 4.5 years. I've been doing some amazing things, like you just said, and, just really basically trying to cement myself in this industry, in the Los Angeles community, in entertainment community.
Fantastic. Well, let's move on to this section. And look, Kyle, I am a sucker for a good quote. What is your favorite quote you'd like to share with everyone?
My favorite quote actually is one from Alvin Ailey. It is, "To be who you are and to become what you are capable of is the only goal worth living."
I love that quote. I've not heard that before. So good. Can you expand a little bit on how you've applied that to your life and your career?
Absolutely. So every day I say I wake up with a set purpose. And in that purpose, it's just my intention for the day. What would I like to get done? If there are things that I feel like I'm lacking within myself, within certain parts of my life, my career, my personal life, I usually try to tackle it head on to become the best version of myself, be the most evolved version of myself in all aspects. So I would definitely say that that's really what the quote means to me, to become the best version, become the most evolved version of yourself as a person.
I love that. And I love that you said, you wake up, I have an intention, and I take things and address things head on, because it's so easy to put the most difficult things at the bottom of our list, because we like to procrastinate by nature as human beings, right? So by saying, you know what, I'm going to do all this hard stuff right up front, because then everything just gets easier from there. And I love that you are consciously making that decision to take on the hard stuff, the difficult stuff first.
I agree because if you don't do that, I mean, the hard stuff is just going to get harder, or the things that you put in the back burner, they're just going to accumulate over
Yeah.
time, and you have to deal with it eventually. So it's like, why not deal with it right now?
Yeah, when quite literally it is an inevitability that it's going to have to be dealt with, right?
Exactly. I agree with you.
All right, well, let's move on to this section. And Kyle, of course, you are an entertainer. I am an entertainer, and I think that you'd agree that this industry can be one of the most subjective, brutally honest, personally emotional industries either of us have ever experienced. And you know as well as I that in order to create and to have a successful career in this industry like you're having now takes a lot of dedication and hard work. And while, of course, yeah, there is an outrageous amount of fun and excitement doing what we do, there are also our fair share of obstacles, challenges, and failures we are going to experience and we're going to have to move forward through. So tell us, what is one key challenge, obstacle, or failure you've experienced in your career, and how did you come out the other side better because of it?
That's a really good question. Actually, it would probably be the first time I ever auditioned for a talent agency.
Mm,
And this had to have been about like 10 years ago. I went to the audition. I was living in New York. I did the audition. I got all the way to the end. 2 weeks later, I got a call that I got an offer for them for representation.
great.
Then 2 weeks later, after that, I got another call from the same agency, and they said that they were reworking their department and they already had a couple of people that looked very similar to me,
Oh,
so they wouldn't be able to represent me. So I was on cloud nine, and then as fast as I went from cloud nine, I went down to the ground.
man.
Like, yeah, and what that taught me is that in the industry that we are, where it can be very visual, it helped me develop a tough skin, knowing that no matter what it is and what audition I go to, I can go and I can be the most amazing person in that room technically and have everything together and do everything that is asked of me and still not get the job because of just the look that
Yeah.
I am. So you really can't, or just the height that I am. And it helps you develop a thick skin, which is very much needed in this industry, just like how you just said. It's very grueling, it's very challenging. I think the most challenging thing is because when you're looking at the visual side of yourself, these are all things that you can't change. I can't make myself taller. I can't make myself a different race. I can't make my hair a different color or whatever, or longer or shorter. So it allows me to accept who I am as a person and as an individual. And whatever job that I'm going to do, I will meant to do it, and it's going to naturally come to me. I feel like a lot of people tend to try and change themselves for the industry, but the industry, we are entertainers. The industry is they make money for us, around the entertainment. And people don't realize that because they're always trying to mold themselves. So I always feel like it's very important to embrace and really get a strong idea of who you are, and then let the industry see how the industry works for you as a person, as you in your own lane.
Yeah, I love that. I love all your insight that has clearly simply come from all of your experience, all of those upsets, all of those wonderful moments as well. And you're right, it's such good knowledge that you've just given everybody that's listening here because that is an inevitability of this industry. It is so subjective and you do need to create and build that thick skin, but also to try to keep it in perspective and not get discouraged because you're getting discouraged about the things that you can't do anything about. And you're not doing yourself any favors by dwelling on those things.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And a lot of people beat themselves up, and then they start, you see, especially in Los Angeles, because everything is so visual and so predicated on literally how you look. There's a lot of just self dysmorphia, where people have these eating disorders or body dysmorphia where they're like, oh, okay, I want to get this done on my body, I want to get that done on my body. And then when you look back at it, when you see all these changes and you look back at your original self and you realize, like, I was actually really good the way I looked,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. All right, well, let's move on to a time that I like to call your spotlight moment. That one moment in time you realized, yes, I am going to be an entertainer for a living. Or maybe it was, yes, this is what I need to be doing as an entertainer. Tell us about that.
I would probably say when I was about 12, around when I'd just been dancing for maybe about 6 months. And the director, I love this director, his name's Jason Cook. He saw my potential and he was just like, you really do have a light that shines on you when you dance. And there was a lead position and this boy already had it. But just for fun, I just kind of learned it and I would do it off to the side. And I remember the guy, something happened with the guy. I want to say he had like a death in the family. So he couldn't do it one weekend for one of our performances. And the director, Mr. Cook, he was like, Kyle, do it. And I went in there, mind you, I'm like right in the front with everybody, where everybody's seeing me. You just see all like the bright lights and like all of that whole thing that happens with stage fright. Like it's really like a sink or swim moment because it's like
Yeah.
everyone's looking at you, lights are all on you, everything. And I just kind of put in my head where I was just like, it's funny. I do this WWJD where it's like, what would Jesus do? Instead of what would Jesus do, I always say, what would Janet do? And it's like Janet Jackson.
Yeah, love it.
So I was just kind of like, who was like, she was one of my big influences to start dancing. So I was like, what would Janet do? And it was like, Janet would show out. So I showed out and, the crowd went really wild. Everybody loved it. And that was kind of when I realized I was like, yeah, this is what I need to be doing. And I just kind of never looked back.
Oh, I love that story. That's so good. And I want to piggyback on that. And let's talk about your number one booked it moment. Walk us through that day, the auditions and callbacks, if they happen to be a part of it. What was going on in your life? And what about that moment makes it your favorite booked it moment?
Oh, wow. I would actually say that moment, they were doing auditions. This is actually when I was in Jubilee at Vegas. They were doing auditions for Will Smith and Bomba Stereo for the Latin Grammys. And I remember I was doing Jubilee, and a lot of the people at Jubilee, we were about to do two shows later on that night, but I really wanted to go to this audition. I was like, oh, this looks like an audition, something I could do. So, like, why not? So it was at the Rock Center for Dance. Went to the audition. Literally, like the room was full with people, full with dancers,
Hmm.
and the choreographer. She was from LA. She came in there, and I remember she kept asking certain people to go, and she was just like, "You go, you go." And then when you went, she would either say, "Please stay," or she would say, "Thank you very much." And I remember she kept skipping over me. So I kind of like, I get in my mind where I'm like, okay, well, they probably just don't think I'm a good dancer. I'm going
Yeah.
to show you. Like, I get real weird about stuff like that. So then I was just waiting for her to finally say, and I was like one of the last people that she finally said go. And then she went, and I was like, I'm going to let this combination have it. She's going to, even if I'm not for the part, she's going to know that I can dance. So I did it, and she was like, all right. She was like, you stay.
Yeah, good.
I was like, okay, that's cool. But I always like, okay, you get past the first part. There's so many levels to it, especially with being a dancer. That's the one thing about it, being a dancer. I feel like with actors and singers, they go in, they sing their song and they do their lines and they go on about their day. The dancers is like, no, we got to still do it again. And then we got to freestyle and all of that. So we had to still stay there. And I was just like, all right, well, like, I had to continue to dance. And then, they did this whole thing where like, oh, okay, everybody take your shirts off. So then I took my shirt off. I still got to stay. And then it got down to like about six of us. And I remember thinking, regardless of whatever, this is a great moment. Like just knowing that, like, even if I was not going to book it, I was here with some pretty dope people that they were all great and we all really just loved what we did. And at the time, I didn't have an agency. So the next day, I was actually heading towards Jubilee to my show. And I got a call, and it was the choreographer. And she was like, "You know, you need an agent, right?" And I was like, "Well, oh, okay." She was like, "Yeah. So I can even put you in contact with MSA agency or Block Talent Agency in Los Angeles because you do need an agent because this is a union job." And I was like, "Wait a minute. So does that mean I booked it?" She was like, "Yeah, you booked it." I screamed at the top of my lungs. I think I called my dad. My friend Jonas, who was, I think he was in the car with me. I told him that I booked it and he was screaming. He was so happy for me. And that was just such a great moment because I always put on my bucket list because, Janet Jackson and Michael Jackson were two really big like advocates for me and why I wanted to start dancing. They both do a lot of award shows. So I always wanted to do award shows. I was just like, I really want to do an award show. Really wanted to do an award show. And this just so happened to happen. So I booked an award show. So it was a really, really big moment for me. And yeah, that was probably the moment where I was just like, wow. I don't have too many moments where I'm like, people are like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do that. I don't have too many of those, but that was one big thing that I did say I really would like to do. And I got to do that. And I was just so incredibly excited, so incredibly thankful. And, when we did it and just standing on that stage and right before we started to perform and seeing all those people out there and we did it, and oddly enough we did it literally like I was dancing literally right in front of Jada Pinkett Smith and all of kids like Willow and so it was really in Jaden. So it was really cool. It was a really out of body experience. And then my family got to see it and I was in Vegas and they were all the way in between New York and LA and they took pictures of them seeing it. And that's really what made me because I had, that moment where you're like, oh, this is really, really a moment that kind of makes your career, makes you like kind of like, look, mom, I made it. And
Yeah,
that was
absolutely.
my dad who's seen me from like me telling him that I want to dance and I'm doing Janet Jackson dance moves in the basement in front of the TV to that moment right there. It was just kind of like a wonderful experience. And I really, it is funny because I was actually, right after that, I took the bus home and I kind of cried because I was just like, wow, like that's a good moment. This is a good moment. It was a cry. It was a happy cry. It wasn't like a sad cry.
Yeah. I love that. And I'm assuming you got an agent out of that as well.
I did. That's actually
Yeah.
how I ended up moving to LA. I got the agent who represented me. I got signed to them. And, it was more the reason that made me want to move to LA once the show French Jubilee ended up finishing up.
Yeah, fantastic. That is such a good story. It encompasses so much from your entire childhood, growing up, all the validation of everything that you've been working so hard for, that giant box that you got to check. So good. I love that. I love that. Great story. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing.
Thank you.
And let's take a moment to talk about the present. What projects are you working on now? What are you looking forward to? And look, we are amidst this global pandemic. How do you see this industry moving forward in the next couple of years?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. The pandemic actually happened when everything started kicking in when I was in Tokyo on a job. So the show Endless Shock, I was doing that show. I've done it for a couple of years now. And I was out in Tokyo and then, the show started getting canceled and I was just like, okay. And then I started noticing that, because Japan is literally right by China. So it all hit Japan. Like, I think Japan was number 3 in the world for the number of cases. So they were just like, stay home, don't do anything, like go out only if you need to. I would definitely say it's going to have to make the entertainment community a little bit more creative about what they do, just because, I feel like eventually we will come back to where everybody can be all in the same area, like in person, but it's going to take a while for people to feel fully safe. I think, I mean, me personally, I think it's probably going to take well into either 2021 or 2022 for people to actually, and I'm not talking about the performers, I'm talking about for the audience, the people who we are entertaining, for them to feel comfortable with being in a big, large space,
Hmm.
enclosed space of people. Everything's not built like the Hollywood Bowl, where it's like, okay, they have Hollywood Bowl is set up outside. So, that's a little bit more relieving. A lot of the theaters and a lot of like the concert arenas and stuff like that, those are all enclosed spaces with a large amount of people. I think it's really going to force the community to have to get creative because, and what sucks is entertainers, in my opinion, are always the last on the essential list because everyone's like, well, we need this and we need that and we need this. But the thing is, we do need entertainment because with all of this stress in the world, we need something to take our minds off of it. Entertainers,
Absolutely.
we are very essential. And people don't realize that because they just look at it as, oh, we're just going up there and singing and dancing and this and that, and we don't really need that. Yes, a lot of people do because the stress of today's world, the stress of the economy, the stress of what we're in, we need entertainment. Every people need a relief. It's the reason why people hire entertainment. It's the reason why people go to the ballet, why people go to the theater, why people go to concerts, because it is a way to get away from the hardships of life. And that is essential.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And hopefully, as time goes on, people start really properly realizing that and feel like they're lacking and really notice that they're lacking in that escape from reality. And this is a tough time. This is probably one of the most stressful times that much of the world has experienced on the whole. There's obviously some places in the world that have, experienced much, much worse things, and that's really horrible. But on a whole global scale, this is a very, very intense time and stressful time. And I agree with you that having entertainment is essential to the well-being of the world. All right, well, let's move on to one of my favorite sections in the interview. I call it the Grease Lightning Round. I am
Right.
going to ask you a handful of questions. I want you to answer them as quickly and concisely as possible, one after another. Are you ready?
I am.
All right, first question. What was the one thing holding you back from committing to a career as an entertainer?
I can honestly say there was nothing. I knew that there were going to be hardships, but I kind of knew that that came with the joy of doing what I love to do.
I love that. Second question. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
I would say create your own lane and don't settle for anything.
Perfect. Third question. What is something that is working for you right now? Or if you'd like to go pre COVID, what was working for you before our industry went on pause?
I would say without a doubt, social media handles and just having a social media presence. I feel like social media is a way for you to create a narrative and to create a lane that no one else has. It's a double-edged sword. There's good things about it and there's not so good things about it. But the good
Hmm,
thing about it is you can create your own story. If done right, you can create your own story, you can create your own narrative, and you can get that across to people who live in these other towns and they want to do what you're doing because you never really, the good thing is they have access to somebody who they can say, this is exactly what I want to do and this person is doing it. And I always love going out. I always love, like, if someone messages me and they're like, hey, thinking about coming out to LA, I just don't know how to get started, like, I will literally sit myself down and take time out to kind of give them the kind of like the cliff notes of how to get started in LA and what they should do and what are some good ideas of what they can do.
yeah, that's amazing. And that's so wonderful that you are keen to do that. And for everyone listening, take note of that. If any of you out there are thinking about making that move to LA, now you know someone to reach out to for sure.
Exactly.
All right. And the fourth question. What is your best resource? Whether that's a book, a movie, a YouTube video, a podcast, maybe a piece of technology that you have found is helping your career right now.
I would say it's probably one of my favorite books. It's a book called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. So the four agreements are: be impeccable with your word, do not take anything personally, do not make assumptions, and always do your best. And those are the four agreements. I've probably been reading it. I read it at least once a year just to kind of like refresh my brain on it and my mentality on it.
Yeah.
And it helps me a lot with going through a lot of things in my career, especially with the whole don't make assumptions and don't take anything personally and always do your best. Because as long as I'm always doing my best, I know that something great is going to be on the horizon. I will always have something.
I love that. And I've not heard of that book before. And I love reading, and I'll have to pick it up.
Please do. It's a wonderful book.
Beautiful. And the fifth question: if you had to start your career from scratch, but you still had all the knowledge and experience you've collected from your career in this industry, what would you do or not do? Would you do anything differently, or would you keep it the same?
I think I would probably have left New York earlier, only because New York was my dad's from New York. I have a lot of family in New York. So me going to New York wasn't as big of a leap as it is for most people. It was kind of like natural for me because I spent so many summers up there. And I think my first big leap career wise and just kind of getting on my own was going to Vegas. And I saw just basically the mindset that I had to have as a performer, as just an entertainer, that I needed to have a consistent work and just a consistent, I would say consistent income in general, doing what I love to do. So just like that hustle, I love the hustle that New York taught me, but I would say I would have left a lot earlier to get out of my own comfort zone.
Yeah, great. I love that you said that, to get out of your own comfort zone, because that's when I think we get the most growth out of our careers, out of ourselves personally, is we got to put ourselves on the edge, and really continually push ourselves, because that's where the cool stuff happens.
I agree.
Absolutely. And the last question: what is the golden nugget knowledge drop you've learned from your successful career in this industry you'd like to leave with everyone?
I would say you are where you are supposed to be.
Absolutely. And try to live in the present, I think, is also part of that, right?
I agree. Yes. And then more so, if you want to change that, then you're supposed to have that reflective moment to change it. And if you need to, like, you're where you're supposed to be because everything is meant to happen for a reason. There's a thing called it's written, meaning everything's already preconceived. It's just, are you going to do the work to get to where you would like to be?
Absolutely. And to wrap up this interview, Kyle, it is time to give yourself a plug. Where can we find you? How do our listeners connect with you? Is there anything you want to promote?
I'm currently waiting to hear back from another show, so there's nothing to really promote, but I'm still in Los Angeles, still always looking to connect and work with somebody and just create some amazing art, be it modeling or dancing. If you can hit me up at Grimchim, Grimchim on Instagram, that's all one word, or hit me up on Facebook, same name, Grimchim, Grim space Chim. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Fantastic. And for everyone listening out there, I have put the links to both of those social media handles in the description of this episode. Kyle, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you so much, Dane. I've had such a blast.
Thank you so much for joining us today. My one call to action for you is to go to youbookeditpodcast.com and join our free email community, where we dig deep into a continually growing resource of truly actionable things you can be doing right now to help advance your entertainment career. Don't miss an episode. We have a new guest 7 days a week. Search for You Booked It on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app and subscribe today. All the best to you. We'll see you tomorrow.